The autumn leaves danced outside Jefferson High School's windows as Principal Martinez stepped up to the podium in the packed auditorium. Students shuffled in their seats, some checking their phones, others whispering about weekend plans. But when the principal's voice echoed through the speakers, a hush fell over the crowd. "Good morning, Eagles." Principal Martinez began, her warm smile radiating across the room. "Today, I want to talk to you about something that has the power to transform not just our school, but our entire community." Angelina Rodriguez sat in the third row, her dark eyes focused intently on the stage. Unlike many of her classmates who seemed disinterested, she leaned forward, curious about what the principal had to say. At 16, Angelina had already learned that small moments could lead to big changes, a lesson her grandmother had taught her before she passed away last year. "We're launching the School Kindness Challenge," Principal Martinez announced, and the words seemed to hang in the air like morning mist. "1 week, 1 change. That's our motto. For the next 7 days, I challenge each and every one of you to perform 1 act of kindness daily. But here's the twist. These can't be grand gestures. They must be small, simple acts that anyone can do." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Some students rolled their eyes, others exchanged skeptical glances. But Angelina felt something stir in her chest, a warm feeling that reminded her of her grandmother's hugs. "The student who shows the most consistent kindness throughout the week will be recognized at our Friday assembly," the principal continued. "But remember, this isn't about winning. It's about discovering how small acts of kindness can create ripples of positive change." As students filed out of the auditorium, Angelina overheard conversations around her. Madison Parker, the head cheerleader, laughed with her friends. "Seriously? A kindness challenge? What are we, 5 years old?" Jake Thompson, the star quarterback, shook his head. "I've got practice every day after school and games to worry about. Who has time for this stuff?" Even Emma Chun, one of the smartest students in school, seemed dismissive. "I'm too busy with college applications and SAT prep. This seems like a distraction." But Angelina felt different. As she walked to her first period English class, she remembered her grandmother's words. "Mija, kindness is like a seed. You plant it in small places, and before you know it, you have a beautiful garden." Monday morning arrived with a crisp October chill. Angelina woke up 30 minutes earlier than usual, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She had spent Sunday evening thinking about the kindness challenge, and she had decided to approach it seriously. Her first opportunity came during breakfast. Her younger brother Carlos, a freshman, was frantically searching through his backpack. "I can't find my history homework anywhere," he groaned, pulling out crumpled papers and broken pencils. "Mrs. Henderson is going to kill me." Normally, Angelina might have teased him about being disorganized. Instead, she set down her cereal bowl and helped him look. "Check your English folder," she suggested gently. "Sometimes papers get mixed up." Sure enough, there was the history assignment, safely tucked between English worksheets. Carlos looked up at his sister with surprise and gratitude. "Thanks, Angie. You saved my life." "That's what sisters are for," she replied, ruffling his hair. At school, Angelina noticed things she had never paid attention to before. During lunch, she saw Marcus Williams sitting alone at a corner table. Marcus was known as the weird kid. He was quiet, wore thick glasses, and spent most of his time reading science fiction novels. Students generally ignored him, and some even made fun of his second-hand clothes and stuttering speech. Angelina had never really thought about Marcus before, but today she found herself walking over to his table. "Hi, Marcus," she said, sitting down across from him. "What are you reading?" Marcus looked up, startled. His eyes darted around nervously, as if checking to see if this was some kind of joke. It's called Foundation," he stammered, "by Isaac Asimov. It's about, well, it's complicated." "Tell me about it," Angelina said, genuinely interested. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus lit up as he explained the intricate plot of his favorite book series. His stutter disappeared as he became passionate about the story, and Angelina found herself genuinely fascinated by his insights. "You know," she said as lunch period ended, "you should join the book club. Mrs. Patterson is always looking for students who love reading. Marcus blinked in surprise. You think they'd want me? I think they'd be lucky to have you, Angelina replied sincerely. As she walked to her next class, Angelina felt a warm glow in her chest. It was such a simple thing, sitting with someone who was alone, listening to them talk about something they loved. But she could see how much it had meant to Marcus. Meanwhile, other students were beginning their own interpretations of the kindness challenge. Madison Parker, despite her initial skepticism, found herself helping a freshman who had dropped her books in the hallway. It was a quick gesture, but the grateful smile she received made her pause and think. Jake Thompson, rushing to practice, noticed an elderly substitute teacher struggling with the heavy box of supplies. Without thinking, he jogged over and carried it to her classroom. "Thank you, young man," the teacher said warmly. "You just made my day so much easier." Even Emma Chin, buried in her college preparation stress, took a moment to explain a difficult calculus problem to a struggling classmate. The act of teaching reminded her why she had fallen in love with mathematics in the first place. Tuesday brought with it the first signs that the kindness challenge was creating ripples throughout Jefferson High. Angelina arrived at school to find Marcus Wilson standing by her locker, holding a small wrapped package. "Hi, Angelina," he said, his voice stronger than it had been the day before. I wanted to give you this. It's a book I think you might like. It's called The Giver. It's not science fiction, but it's about how small acts can change everything." Angelina was touched by the gesture. "Marcus, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted, then smiled shyly. "And I talked to Mrs. Patterson yesterday after school. I'm joining book club next week." During first period, Angelina's English teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, no relation, despite the shared last name, noticed something different about the classroom atmosphere. Students were more patient with each other during group discussions, and when Sarah Mitchell struggled to read a passage aloud due to her dyslexia, several classmates offered quiet encouragement instead of the usual snickers. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Mr. Rodriguez had been teaching for 15 years, and he could sense when something positive was shifting in the school's culture. At lunch, Angelina decided to expand her circle of kindness. She noticed that Mrs. Garcia, one of the lunch ladies, looked particularly tired. The cafeteria was busy, and students were being their usual impatient selves, some even complaining about the food. "Mrs. Garcia," Angelina said when she reached the front of the line, "that lasagna smells amazing. Thank you for working so hard to feed all of us." Mrs. Garcia's face lit up with surprise and joy. "Mija, thank you for saying that. It's been a long morning, and you just made it so much better." Behind Angelina in line, she heard Jake Thompson say, "Yeah, Mrs. Garcia, the food here is actually pretty good. Thanks for everything you do." Soon, other students were chiming in with their own words of appreciation. Mrs. Garcia's smile grew wider with each kind comment, and her energy seemed to return. She began serving food with renewed enthusiasm, even adding extra portions for students she knew were struggling financially. The ripple effect continued throughout the day. In chemistry class, when Tyler Brooks accidentally knocked over a beaker of solution, instead of the usual groans and complaints from classmates about the delay, several students immediately jumped up to help clean the mess. The teacher, Ms. Johnson, was so surprised by the collaborative response that she decided to end class 5 minutes early. Madison Parker found herself in an unexpected situation during cheerleading practice. One of the junior cheerleaders, Ashley, was struggling with a complex routine and was clearly frustrated to the point of tears. "I'm never going to get this right," Ashley said, sitting on the gym floor in defeat. "Maybe I should just quit." The old Madison might have been impatient, focused only on perfection for the upcoming game. But something had shifted. Instead, she sat down next to Ashley. "Hey, I remember when I first tried that routine. I fell flat on my face in front of the entire team," Madison said with a laugh. "Want me to break it down step by step with you?" For the next hour, Madison worked patiently with Ashley, and by the end of practice, not only had Ashley mastered the routine, but she had regained her confidence. The other cheerleaders noticed Madison's leadership and began offering help to struggling teammates as well. Even Emma Chun found her rigid schedule interrupted by kindness. While studying in the library, she noticed a sophomore crying quietly in the corner. The girl was surrounded by college prep books and looked overwhelmed. Emma's first instinct was to ignore the situation and focus on her own work. But something made her close her laptop and walk over. "Are you okay?" Emma asked gently. The girl, whose name was Sophie, looked up with red eyes. "I'm trying to plan for college, but it's all so overwhelming. My parents want me to get into an Ivy League school, but I don't even know what I want to study. I feel like I'm drowning." Emma sat down beside her. "I felt the exact same way last year. Want to talk about it?" They spent the next 2 hours discussing college options, career paths, and ways to manage the stress of high academic expectations. By the time they parted, Sophie looked like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you so much," Sophie said. "I was feeling so alone in all of this. You have no idea how much this helped." As Emma walked home that evening, she realized that helping Sophie had been more fulfilling than any practice test or college application essay she had completed. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected surprise. Principal Martinez stood in the main hallway before first period, greeting students with a warm smile and handing out small cards. "What's this?" Angelina asked as she accepted her card. "Kindness cards," Principal Martinez explained. "I've been watching what's happening in our school these past 2 days, and I'm amazed. Students are helping each other, teachers are smiling more, and even our custodial staff mentioned that the hallways seem friendlier. These cards are for you to give to someone when you witness an act of kindness." Angelina looked at the card. It was simple but beautiful, with the school logo and the words, "Caught being kind. Thank you for making our school a better place." Throughout the morning, Angelina observed her classmates more closely than ever. In math class, she watched as David Kim, one of the quieter students, patiently helped Jennifer Lopez understand a complex equation. Jennifer had been struggling in math all semester and usually felt too embarrassed to ask for help. During the break, Angelina approached David and handed him a kindness card. "I saw you helping Jennifer today. That was really kind of you." David's face turned red, but he smiled. "It wasn't a big deal. I just remember what it felt like to be confused in math." "It was a big deal to Jennifer," Angelina replied, "and it was a big deal to me to see it." The kindness cards became a phenomenon throughout the school. Students began looking for opportunities to give and receive them. Teachers started carrying them as well, recognizing both students and each other for acts of kindness. At lunch, Angelina decided to sit with a different group. She chose a table where Lucy Chun, Emma's younger sister, a shy sophomore, was sitting alone while reading a book. "Mind if I join you?" Angelina asked. Lucy looked up, surprised. "Oh, I'm sure. I was just reading during lunch. I don't really. I'm not very social." "What are you reading?" Angelina asked, sitting down. "It's called To Kill a Mockingbird," Lucy replied. "We're reading it for English class, but I'm actually enjoying it more than I expected." "That's one of my favorite books," Angelina said. "What do you think of Atticus Finch?" For the next 30 minutes, they had a deep discussion about literature, social justice, and courage. Lucy, who usually barely spoke in class, was articulate and passionate when discussing books. "You should consider joining the debate team," Angelina suggested. "You have really thoughtful opinions, and you express them well." Lucy shook her head. "I could never do that. I get too nervous speaking in front of people." "What if I helped you practice?" Angelina offered. "We could start small, maybe just practicing with me, then with a few friends, and work up from there." Lucy's eyes widened with surprise and hope. You would do that for me?" "Of course," Angelina said. "Everyone deserves to have their voice heard." Meanwhile, other students were creating their own connections. Jake Thompson, who had never paid much attention to anyone outside of his athletic circle, found himself partnered with Marcus in biology class for a lab experiment. Initially, Jake was frustrated. Marcus was methodical and careful, while Jake preferred to rush through assignments to get them done quickly. But as they worked together, Jake began to appreciate Marcus's attention to detail and vast knowledge of scientific concepts. "Dude, how do you know so much about molecular biology?" Jake asked as Marcus explained a complex concept. Marcus blushed. I read a lot. Science is fascinating to me. Did you know that the human body has about 37 trillion cells, and each one is like a tiny factory with its own specialized job?" Jake found himself genuinely interested. "That's actually pretty cool. I never thought about it that way." By the end of the class period, they had not only completed their experiment successfully, but Jake had learned more about biology than he had all semester. When their teacher praised their excellent work, Jake made sure to give Marcus full credit. "This guy is a genius," Jake announced to the class. "I couldn't have done any of this without him." Marcus glowed with pride, and several other students looked at him with newfound respect. Emma Chun was experiencing her own revelations. While walking to her AP Literature class, she noticed that Michael Torres, a student she had always dismissed as just a jock, was carrying a worn copy of The Great Gatsby. "Are you reading that for class?" she asked, falling into step beside him. Michael looked embarrassed. "Yeah, for Mrs. Patterson's class. I'm not really good with all this symbolism stuff, though. I mean, why can't authors just say what they mean?" Instead of her usual superior attitude, Emma found herself genuinely wanting to help. "Actually, I love analyzing literature. Would you like some help understanding the symbolism?" They spent their free period discussing the green light, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, and the concept of the American dream. Michael's insights, while different from Emma's academic approach, were surprisingly thoughtful and grounded in real-world observations. "You know," Emma said as the period ended, "you have a really unique perspective. You see things from angles that I would never consider." Michael smiled gratefully. "Thanks. I always thought I was just too dumb for this stuff." "You're not dumb at all," Emma replied firmly. "You just think differently, and that's valuable." Thursday brought with it the first real test of the kindness challenge. Not everyone was embracing the movement, and some students were beginning to push back against what they saw as forced positivity. Angelina arrived at school to find graffiti on her locker. "Kindness is for losers." Her heart sank as she stared at the cruel words. Around her, other students were gathering, some pointing and whispering. "Hey, are you okay?" Marcus appeared at her side, his voice filled with concern. Before Angelina could answer, Jake Thompson jogged up. "Who did this?" he asked angrily. "This is not cool." Soon, a small crowd had gathered, but instead of the usual gossip and speculation, students began offering support. Madison Parker appeared with wet paper towels and cleaning supplies from the janitor's closet. "Let's get this cleaned off," she said firmly. Emma Chun approached with a beautifully decorated piece of paper. "I made this last night," she said, taping it over the graffiti. It read, "Kindness is strength," in colorful, artistic lettering. As more students arrived and saw what had happened, they too offered support. Lucy Chun brought flowers from a school garden to tape around Emma's sign. David Kim offered to walk with Angelina between classes in case whoever did this tried to bother her again. The incident, rather than discouraging the kindness movement, seemed to strengthen it. Students were rallying around each other, and the sense of community was growing stronger. But the challenges weren't over. During lunch, a confrontation erupted in the cafeteria. Brad Stevens, a senior known for his aggressive behavior, was bullying a group of freshmen, taking their lunch money and making fun of their clothes. "Come on, nerds," Brad taunted. "Hand over your cash, or I'll make sure your high school experience is miserable." The freshmen looked terrified, and other students were either ignoring the situation or watching nervously from a distance. In the past, this kind of bullying might have continued unchecked, but this week was different. Jake Thompson stood up from his table and walked over. "Hey, Brad, why don't you pick on someone your own size?" Brad laughed. "Oh, look, the golden boy wants to play hero. Stay out of this, Thompson." "I don't think I will," Jake replied calmly. "These kids aren't bothering anyone. Leave them alone." Soon, other students began standing up as well. Marcus, despite his usual timidity, joined Jake. "This isn't right, Brad. We should be helping each other, not hurting each other." Madison Parker stood with them, followed by Emma Chun, Angelina, and dozens of other students. The cafeteria fell silent as nearly the entire student body faced down the bully. Brad looked around at the sea of determined faces and realized he was outnumbered. "Whatever," he muttered, backing down. "This school has gone soft." As he walked away, the cafeteria erupted in applause. The freshmen who had been targeted looked amazed and grateful. "Thank you," one of them said to Jake. "I can't believe everyone stood up for us." "That's what a community does," Jake replied. "We look out for each other." The incident became a turning point. Word spread quickly throughout the school that bullying would no longer be tolerated, not because of administrative policies, but because the students themselves wouldn't stand for it. Later that afternoon, Principal Martinez called an impromptu assembly. She had heard about both the graffiti incident and the cafeteria confrontation. "Students of Jefferson High," she began, her voice filled with emotion, "what I've witnessed this week has been extraordinary. You've shown that kindness isn't weakness, it's courage. Standing up for someone who's being bullied, reaching out to someone who's lonely, helping someone who's struggling. These are acts of bravery." She paused, looking out at the sea of young faces. "The kindness challenge was meant to last 1 week, but I can see that you've started something that goes far beyond any challenge. You've begun to change the culture of our school." The auditorium was unusually quiet, students hanging on every word. "Tomorrow is our final day of the official challenge, but I hope what you've learned about the power of kindness will continue long after this week ends." As students filed out of the auditorium, Angelina felt a deep sense of pride and hope. The week had been more transformative than she could have imagined, not just for the school, but for herself. She had discovered strengths she didn't know she had, and had formed friendships she never expected. Friday morning arrived with an energy that was palpable throughout Jefferson High School. Students entered the building with smiles, greeting each other warmly in the hallways. Teachers commented that they had never seen the school feel so positive and unified. Angelina arrived early, as had become her habit this week. She wanted to check on the flowers and decorations that had been added to her locker throughout the week. What she found took her breath away. Her locker had become a shrine to positivity. Dozens of kindness cards were taped around it, along with drawings, inspirational quotes, and small gifts from students she had helped or who had simply been inspired by her actions. A sign made by the art club read, "Thank you, Angelina, for showing us that kindness is contagious." But she wasn't the only one being recognized. Throughout the hallways, lockers had been decorated to honor students who had made a difference during the week. Marcus's locker was covered with thank you notes from book club members and students he had tutored in science. Jake's was decorated with messages from underclassmen he had protected and encouraged. Madison's bore tributes from her fellow cheerleaders and students she had helped. The transformation wasn't just in decorations, it was in behavior. In first period, when Mrs. Anderson's computer crashed during her presentation, instead of groaning and complaining, students immediately offered to help. 3 students with technical skills worked together to fix the problem, while others entertained the class with impromptu presentations on the lesson topic. During chemistry class, what had once been a competitive environment had become collaborative. Students were freely sharing notes, helping each other with equations, and celebrating each other's successes. Ms. Johnson observed the change with amazement. "In 15 years of teaching," she told her colleague later, "I've never seen students support each other like this. They're not just learning chemistry, they're learning how to be human beings." At lunch, the cafeteria looked completely different. Instead of the usual segregated tables, athletes with athletes, academics with academics, popular kids with popular kids, students were sitting in mixed groups, engaged in animated conversations across traditional social boundaries. Angelina sat at a large table that included Marcus, Jake, Madison, Emma, Lucy, David, Michael, and several other students who had connected during the week. The conversation ranged from weekend plans to college applications to favorite books, and everyone's voice was heard and valued. "You know what's funny?" Madison said, twirling her fork in her salad. "A week ago, I thought I knew everyone worth knowing in this school, but I've met more interesting people this week than in the previous 3 years combined." That's because we all stayed in our little bubbles, Emma added. I was so focused on grades and college prep that I missed out on knowing amazing people like Michael here, who sees literature in ways that never occurred to me. Michael blushed at the compliment, and I thought people like Emma were just stuck-up brains, but she's actually really cool and willing to help. Jake laughed. I was the worst. I basically only talked to other football players and cheerleaders. I had no idea that Marcus could explain why the sky is blue in a way that actually makes sense, or that Lucy writes poetry that would make professional writers jealous. Lucy looked shocked. You read my poetry. Emma showed me one of your pieces about kindness. Jake admitted. It was beautiful. You should submit it to the school literary magazine. The conversation continued, with each student reflecting on how their perspectives had changed. They weren't just talking about the people they had met, but about the person they had discovered themselves to be when they chose kindness over indifference. As the lunch period ended, they realized they didn't want the conversation to stop. Spontaneously, they made plans to meet at the local diner after school to continue their discussion. The afternoon classes passed quickly, with teachers and students alike anticipating the final assembly, where the results of the kindness challenge would be announced. However, rumors were circulating that something unexpected was going to happen. When the final bell rang, students filed into the auditorium with excited anticipation. Principal Martinez took the stage with a broad smile. Students of Jefferson High, she began. This week has been remarkable. When I announced the kindness challenge on Monday, I hoped it would make a small positive impact. What actually happened exceeded my wildest expectations. She gestured to a large screen that displayed photos taken throughout the week. Students helping each other, cleaning up the school grounds, tutoring, sharing lunches, and supporting one another in countless ways. Your teachers have been documenting acts of kindness all week, she continued. We have recorded over 500 individual acts of kindness performed by students in just 5 days. But more importantly, we've documented a transformation in the culture of our school. The auditorium buzzed with excitement and pride. Now, I know you're all waiting to hear who will be recognized as the winner of the kindness challenge. But here's what we've discovered. There's no single winner because you are all winners. She paused, letting the words sink in. However, there's one student who has been mentioned by more teachers, staff members, and fellow students than any other. A student who not only showed consistent kindness, but inspired others to do the same. That student is Angelina Rodriguez. The auditorium erupted in applause as Angelina made her way to the stage, her face burning with embarrassment and pride. When she reached the podium, Principal Martinez handed her a small trophy, but more importantly, a microphone. Angelina, would you like to say something to your fellow students? Angelina looked out at the sea of faces, friends she had just made, classmates she had helped, and people who had helped her. Her voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. Thank you for this honor, but I don't deserve it any more than dozens of other students here. This week taught me that kindness isn't about grand gestures or being perfect. It's about paying attention to the people around us and caring enough to act. She paused, gathering her thoughts. At the beginning of the week, I thought kindness was something you did for other people. But I learned that when you're kind to others, you change too. I made friends I never would have met, learned things I never would have discovered, and became a person I liked better than who I was on Monday. The auditorium was completely silent, hanging on her every word. So let's not let this end with a challenge. Let's make kindness a habit, not just an assignment. Let's continue to see each other as human beings worthy of respect and care. Let's make Jefferson High a place where everyone belongs. The standing ovation was thunderous and lasted several minutes. As Angelina returned to her seat, she was overwhelmed by the hugs, high fives, and words of appreciation from her classmates. But the assembly wasn't over. Principal Martinez returned to the podium with another surprise. Due to the incredible success of this week's kindness challenge, the school board has approved a new program. Starting next month, we will be implementing peer mentorship programs, cross-grade buddy systems, and monthly community service projects. We're also establishing a kindness club that will be open to all students. The excitement in the auditorium was palpable. Students were already talking about which programs they wanted to join and how they could continue building on the week's momentum. As students poured out of the auditorium that Friday afternoon, the atmosphere was electric with possibility. The kindness challenge was officially over, but nobody wanted the feeling to end. Angelina found herself surrounded by classmates, some she had known for years and others she had just met during the week. The plans to meet at the diner had evolved into a larger gathering, with nearly 30 students deciding to continue the celebration. At Murphy's Diner, a local establishment that had been serving the community for decades, the group took over the entire back section. Tables were pushed together, and conversations flowed freely across the extended surface. "You know what I realized this week?" said Ashley, the cheerleader who had struggled with the routine earlier in the week. "I spent so much time worrying about what people thought of me that I never took the time to think about what they might be going through." David Kim nodded enthusiastically. "Same here. I always assumed popular kids like Jake and Madison had perfect lives and wouldn't want to talk to someone like me. But everyone has challenges and insecurities." Jake laughed. "Are you kidding? I've been terrified that people only like me because I can throw a football. This week I discovered that I actually enjoy helping people and that there's more to me than just sports." Madison smiled. "And I learned that being a leader isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about caring enough about other people to support them when they need it." Emma, who had been quietly listening, added, "I think I learned the most important lesson of all. I was so focused on achieving my goals that I forgot why those goals mattered in the first place. Success doesn't mean anything if you're not connected to other people." The conversation continued for hours, with students sharing stories from the week, discussing their plans for the future, and making commitments to maintain the friendships they had formed. Marcus, who had been quiet for most of the evening, finally spoke up. "I want to thank all of you for something I never expected to have, friends. Real friends. This week changed my life, and I don't want to go back to being invisible." "You were never invisible to us," Angelina said warmly. "We just weren't paying attention. That's not the same thing." Lucy Chun, who had been inspired to find her voice during the week, stood up with a piece of paper in her hand. "I wrote something this week, and I'd like to share it with you all, if that's okay." The table fell silent as Lucy began to read her poem. "One week, one change. In hallways where we passed like ships, never stopping, never seeing. We learned that kindness is a bridge between who we were and who we're being. A smile shared with a lonely soul. A hand extended to lift someone up. Words of encouragement when hope grows thin. These small acts fill an empty cup. We thought we knew each other well, divided by our groups and grades. But kindness showed us hidden depths, in hearts where true connections made. One week to change a lifetime's view. One choice to see beyond ourselves. In caring for each other's pain, we found our truest, better selves. The challenge ends, but not the call. To choose compassion over fear. For in the garden of the heart, kindness blooms throughout the year." The silence that followed was filled with emotion. Several students wiped away tears, moved by both the beautiful words and the transformation they had witnessed in quiet Lucy. "That's incredible," Emma whispered. "You have to submit that to the literary magazine." "Better yet," Jake added, "you should read that at the next school assembly." Lucy blushed but nodded. "I think I'd like that. A week ago, I never would have had the courage, but now I feel like I have something important to say." As the evening wound down and students began to head home, they made plans to meet again the following week. The kindness challenge might be over, but the community they had built was just beginning. Angelina was among the last to leave, walking slowly through the cooling October air with Marcus, who lived in the same direction. They walked in comfortable silence for several blocks before Marcus spoke. "Angelina, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What made you decide to really commit to the kindness challenge? I mean, a lot of students just ignored it or did the bare minimum." Angelina considered the question carefully. "My grandmother always told me that we have two choices in life. We can make the world a little better or a little worse with every action we take. She said that most people think their individual actions don't matter, but that's not true. Every kindness creates ripples. She paused, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. When my grandmother died last year, I felt lost. I didn't know how to honor her memory or carry on the things she taught me. But this week, I realized that the best way to honor someone who showed you kindness is to show kindness to others. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. My mom always says that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in helping others. I never really understood what she meant until this week. They reached the corner where they would part ways, but neither seemed eager to end the conversation. Marcus, Angelina said, I want you to know that you were one of the first people to inspire me this week. When you gave me that book on Tuesday, it showed me that kindness creates more kindness. You didn't just receive kindness, you passed it on. Marcus smiled, his confidence noticeably stronger than it had been just a week earlier. Thank you for seeing me, Angelina. Really seeing me. That changed everything. As they said good night and headed to their respective homes, both carried with them the knowledge that they had been part of something special, something that would continue to grow and spread far beyond the walls of Jefferson High School. 6 months later, Jefferson High School was virtually unrecognizable from the institution it had been before the Kindness Challenge. The changes that had begun during that transformative week in October had taken root and flourished. The Kindness Club had become one of the most popular organizations in the school, with over 200 members. They organized monthly community service projects, peer mentorship programs, and regular kindness campaigns that kept the spirit of compassion alive in the school culture. Angelina had been elected president of the Kindness Club, but she insisted on sharing leadership responsibilities with the diverse group of students who had emerged as leaders during the original challenge. Marcus served as vice president, his confidence and communication skills having blossomed remarkably.